Here we go, back again with another episode of the Around the Show Sports Podcast. As always, this is your host, Kyle Showalter, and I'm not joined tonight by my usual co-hosts of Brandon Mills or Christian Hosfeld, both of them taking a week off. But I do have an old friend of the show. If you've been listening for a long time, his name may ring a bell. He currently covers the Chiefs for Fansided and hosts the Sunday Slate podcast with his buddy Alex Ayers. Ladies and gentlemen, Casey Proctor, welcome to the show, man.
What up, Buck?
It's an absolute blast. Anytime I get to talk to Casey about anything, whether it's ball, life, old times back in college, one of my college teammates, it's always a great time, so I'm stoked to have him on the show tonight. Case, can't thank you enough for some short notice. Just asked you last night, but you were more than happy to jump on, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, of course. Any opportunity to talk about our favorite thing in the world, I'm in.
Well, I guess there's no point in waiting on it. Casey, you did a lot of work this offseason for the NFL draft. You and Alex on the Sunday Slate podcast released 4 mock drafts, right?
Yeah.
And an entire ultimate draft kit, something that I used to get myself ready for the draft. It was a lot of fun to read through. You guys did a great job designing it, like the graphics of it all looked super, super dope. I'm going to see if I can find the link to it real quick as we kind of jump into this. But we're going to talk a lot about the NFL draft. First round was last Thursday, the day that our last week's episode released for the Around the Show Sports podcast. We didn't get to talk a lot about it, but we did talk about it a lot the week before. And we talked about a lot of things like Malik Willis, where is he going to go, who's going to go number 1 overall, and we now have the answers to these things, so we're going to go ahead and jump right in, and Casey and I are going to go over our 3 favorite draft classes, and I'm going to go ahead and preface this by saying this year wasn't too much of a tape head like I usually am. Usually I'm diving into like the 3rd, 4th, 5th round at least, guys. I think are going to go there. This year, I don't think I watched a single guy who went beyond the 3rd round beyond the 2nd round besides maybe Nakobe Dean, so I'm going to take a back seat and kind of defer to Casey on a lot of this stuff, but I still feel like I have a good enough base of knowledge just by watching games, the little bit of tape digging that I did to kind of grade these drafts, at least on a surface level. So, Case, we're going to go ahead and jump in. I'll go ahead and let you, as the guest tonight, go ahead and announce your honorable mentions and your number 3 draft class first.
Okay, so my one and only real honorable mention would actually be, and it pains me a little bit to say this as a fan of the Kansas City Chiefs, is the Raiders. And that only really it applies to one line of logic, and that's that they thickened up big time. They had a crazy offseason. I think that they signed some 25-plus free agents, including Devontae Adams, obviously the biggest of that bunch. But in this draft, in their hometown, hosting it, they didn't make a pick until number 90 overall, where they took Dylan Parham, center out of Memphis. Zamir White followed that in the 4th round, running back from Georgia. And then on the back end, their last 2 picks, 4th round, number 126 overall, Neil Farrell Jr. from LSU. And then in the 5th round, Matthew Butler from Tennessee. And they're an honorable mention for me, again, because of how thick they got up front on the defensive side of the football. With Neil Farrell and Matthew Butler joining the defensive tackle room, the smallest member of the Raiders defensive line is Bilal Nichols, who they picked up in free agency that the Bears did not re-sign. And that dude's 6'4", 290 pounds. So there's a brick wall in Las Vegas, and we will see what that turns out to be. But that earned an honorable mention for me. And I know for these 3 favorites, you and I had some overlap. So I'll go in a direction that I know that you're not too hot on. And number 3, I'm going to say the New York Jets. Primarily because, you get a team that makes 7-8 picks, and they have a roster that just, frankly, last year was abysmal. There was the Elijah Moores, and there's the high expectations and high hopes for Zach Wilson, but that defense was incomplete, and the offense was lacking in efficiency. So with them taking Ahmad Gardner and Garrett Wilson, both in the top 10, sneaking back into the 1st round to get Jermaine Johnson at pick 26, who the rumor mill was spinning in circles in the week leading up to the draft, was the apple of their eye and could have been their 4 overall pick. So they still get their guy on the back end, a killer 1st round from them. They get RB1 in Breece Hall. Jeremy Ruckert, who was the Sunday Slate's tight end number 1, joins a crowded tight end room with CJ Uzomah and Tyler Conklin, which was an awesome move, signing the both of them in free agency for the Jets, in that they have a young quarterback that needs to build on his base, right? The hype about Zach Wilson is the cannon arm, but giving him some intermediate routes that are coming from trustworthy guys, proven NFL guys. I mean, Uzomah and Conklin are both going on year 5 or 6, I believe, in the league respectively. And Jeremy Ruckert is another guy that just fills out that room. And then 2 more big points, rounding out their 4th round. And I think they were super top heavy. I don't think they picked past the 5th round, but they got Max Mitchell, a tackle from Louisiana Lafayette or University
it was
of
just
Louisiana?
University of Louisiana, yeah.
The Raging Cajuns. And he was a part of a top 5 ranked offensive line for all 4 years of his college career, and he was the captain. He was lauded for his leadership and his toughness. He's kind of a leaner frame, but he was one of my favorite second, third tier tackles in the draft. And then Michael Clemens, the edge rusher from A&M, he's just got a mean streak that competes with anybody in this class. So I thought that the Jets deserve a note here, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have a bad draft for sure. I definitely think if I was picking a top 10 instead of a top 3 that the Jets would be included on there. I think the main thing that I don't love about the class is I personally much would have rather seen them go with Jameson Williams at 10 instead of Garrett Wilson. I just think he's a better wide receiver. Yeah, you're a little bit worried about the ACL tear, but I think at this point with the way ACLs are kind of treated nowadays, they're not as serious as they used to be. Granted, it's not 100%, but the vast majority of the time these guys are going to be just fine when they're dealing with an ACL. It's not like it's an Achilles or something like that, which is a little bit more worrisome. And I just would rather have Jameson Williams than Garrett Wilson at that spot. So I think that's the one knock that kind of takes them out of this top 3. Because the top 3, man, that's the top 4% of the league's draft classes. That's a big moniker to reach. For my honorable mentions, I went with the Giants, who I think crushed the first round, getting KT and Evan Neal at 5 and 7. The Lions did a great job getting Aidan Hutchinson and then the aforementioned Jameson Williams. And then I think the Chiefs, if they hadn't taken Trent McDuffie, I think that was a little bit of a reach. I probably would have had them in this top 3. But I'm going to go ahead and push into the team at 3 that I think deserves that spot. And for me, that's the Houston Texans. They made 9 picks. Derek Stingley, cornerback at LSU. He's been a projected top 5 pick since his freshman season. Ran a 4.37 at his pro day. And if you watch him play, man, the tape just screams NFL corner. He's strong at the point of press. He can run with anybody in the league. He's great at the point of contact with the ball. Good ball skills, whether it's interceptions or knocking the ball away. And I think he's just a great overall football player. You got to love taking a guy like that at 3, especially someone who's going to step in and be a good day 1 starter. They also got Kenyon Green at pick 15, who played all over the line in college. He moved out to tackle this year and struggled just a little bit. But if they bring him in, I think he's going to be a solid guard for them going forward. I actually really like John Mechie out of Alabama. I would have considered him in the first round before his knee injury personally. And I think my favorite pick has to be Christian Harris. And I'm sure there's some agreement there from you. This is a guy who flies all over the field. He's a 4.44 guy at the combine. He played DB in high school, I believe. When you watch the tape, he's all over the field. I found myself, whenever I was watching Alabama, my eyes were instantly drawn to him whenever he was running around the field. Just a guy that I think plays really, really good, strong football from sideline to sideline at the linebacker position in today's NFL that's more important than ever. So for me, I got the Texans at that number 3 spot. I think they absolutely crushed the first 3 rounds.
Yeah, well, and if you look one step further into round 4, Dameon Pierce, running back from Florida, that kid is an absolute bruiser. I mean, he just bangs, and he's guys like that. I mean, shout out Derek Stingley. You mentioned the crazy ball skills they develop through the trenches with a Kenyon Green. You get a receiver in John Mechie. Jalen Petrie comes in the second round, who's I look at him as Honey Badger 2.0, Tyrann Mathieu light. And then you round out, the first 4 rounds with a guy that this running back class didn't get all of that hype because, nobody went in the first round, but there was crazy depth in it. And somebody like Dameon Pierce brings an edge to, really an unimpressive offense. The Texans, and this isn't the offense's fault, but the Texans got 40-burgered 4 times last year, and I believe that 3 of those games, the point differential was over 30. So, I mean,
that
the
is
offense
so brutal.
Was just as bad as the defense.
That is so
and
bad.
You plug in a couple of studs and somebody that's down to just lower his head and go in between the tackles for as long as you ask him. I mean, there was concerns about him as a receiver, but there's just not enough tape on it, and I think that he's gonna blossom in the league. So I'm gonna jump into your honorable mentions and do a little bit of home cooking here, if you don't mind, for my second favorite, and I'm gonna put the Chiefs on the pedestal that they deserve to be on. This is a team, folks, that was just buried through the first part of this offseason, the free agency stretch of this offseason, because the AFC West was making so many moves. Russell Wilson comes to Denver, Devontae Adams goes to Las Vegas, J.C. Jackson and Khalil Mack go to Los Angeles to play for the Chargers. And there was just so many seemingly impact moves. There's plenty to talk shit about too, like Randy Gregory getting a $70 million bag by the donkeys up in the Mile High. But the Chiefs were on the back burner, and the thought as a guy that stays plugged in to the AFC West, the thought was that the AFC West was getting away from Kansas City. And the funny thing is that this whole division has been doing everything that it's done since 2018, once Patrick Mahomes burst onto the scene, to catch up to the Chiefs, and nobody ever did it. So yeah, give them their flowers. They did a great job business-wise. The GMs in the AFC West, they deserve their kudos. They had great off seasons. But then a little something happened, a la the Tyreek Hill trade. And I know that you wanted to talk about this a little bit later, and how the perspective of positional value is shifting, and where teams are putting the importance on youth and affordability rather than league standing and stature. But that Tyreek Hill trade brought the Chiefs 6 draft picks. And you want to look at like the Eagles and the A.J. Brown deal and this that happened on draft day. The Eagles just fleeced the Titans for its 2 picks for A.J. Brown, and Tyreek Hill commands 6. Now, granted, Tyreek Hill is almost in a league of his own, at least for versatility and what he brings to a football field. But the Kansas City Chiefs, who have hosted 4 straight AFC championship games, gone to 2 Super Bowls and won one of them, had 12 picks in the 2022 NFL draft. And they went off. You wanted to dog my boy Trent McDuffie a minute ago. I get that there's concerns about his length and whatnot, but University of Washington, those Huskies, that is cornerback U. Last time we dipped into that pond, we pulled out a Marcus Peters, a perennial Pro Bowl cornerback. So you go Trent McDuffie, who I love. He plays bigger than his size. George Karlaftis at 30, who was in the week leading up to the draft, tanking on draft boards for whatever reason. I honestly, in the moment, was a little bit higher on Jermaine Johnson. I think that the technical aspect of his pass rush is a little bit more advanced than George Karlaftis. George Karlaftis is the Greek freak nonetheless, but the most legitimately pure bull rusher that was in this class. He just pins the ears back and gets after it. But he's a kid that grew up in Greece playing water polo, so I don't have any worries about his explosiveness and the potential of him to develop in this league. You move into day 2, the second round, Skye Moore comes to town. That shattered me at first because I have been pounding the table for my dog, George Pickens, since January. And, I mean, I love that kid, always did love that kid. I think that he's got an awesomely bright future ahead of him, and I think that Pittsburgh was the perfect place for him to land. But Skye Moore comes in as a vertically fast guy, a dude that has some shiftiness at the top of his routes, and a kid with some absolute mitts. He's got like 10.5-inch hands. He had the second lowest drop rate in his college career, right behind George Pickens. He dropped some 3% of passes throughout his entire college career. And the only major concern is who he was playing coming out of Western Montana. But Skye Moore, he's going to be a great piece to a new receiver room in Kansas City that is incredibly well-rounded. You keep moving down the line, Brian Cook, DB from Cincinnati. I call him a walking hit stick. He loves to lay the wood. Leo Chenal, the lieutenant of Death Row, meeting the Red Kingdom, coming to Arrowhead. Love that pick. Joshua Williams, lanky corner. Darian Kennard, a slider down the board, but a vicious, mean tackle who at the very worst is going to be an incredibly impressive interior offensive lineman. And then on the very back end, Isaiah Pacheco, running back from Rutgers, who is straight up Adrian Peterson light. And if you got a problem with that, you know where to find me.
Yeah, that's CEH's replacement right there, taking in the 7th round, Isaiah Pacheco. Casey's a big CEH guy. I'm not so much. I like to give him a lot of shit about that whenever I get the opportunity.
He's never been healthy. We'll see what happens, all right?
Yeah, I mean, briefly, we can talk just for a second about that Tyreek Hill trade. You mentioned all the draft picks they got. I think there's definitely some kudos that deserve to be given over to Kansas City. What they did with the picks they got back, I mean, they did a fantastic job with this draft. I just think they didn't do a great job with that top pick, so I have a hard time just getting them on this list. But again, another class that if I was talking, top 5, maybe even potentially, the Chiefs probably sneak in there at either 4 or 5. I really do like this class overall. Karlaftis is a stud. He's also just such a smooth athlete. Watching him pass rush, he's so technically sound and explosive. He's not going to be a 15 sack guy in the NFL, but he's going to be a guy who gets to the quarterback. It probably has a lot more pressures than sacks personally, which is great. That's huge value. But I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go and kick it over to my number 2 draft class. And for me, it's the Philadelphia Eagles, and you have to factor in everything they did over the course of the draft. And I'll explain what I mean by that. They only made 5 picks, so definitely different from what the Chiefs did, what the Texans did, what my number 1 team did, definitely vastly different from them. But with those 5 picks, I think when they got on the clock, they were sprinting to Roger Goodell to turn that ticket in. Jordan Davis at pick number 13. He's a guy that I probably would have seen Kyle Hamilton go in his spot as an Eagles fan personally, but I don't hate the pick. If this is a guy who they can unlock as a pass rusher, this is a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, no question. He's 340 pounds, absolutely massive human being. He's athletic. It just kind of seems like he checks out sometimes when the passing situation comes off. He had a hard time getting on the field for Georgia during those passing downs, but holy shit was this guy special against the run. You couldn't do anything up the middle against Georgia with this guy. You pair him with the rest of the guys in that defense. I mean, it was just a match made in heaven for Jordan Davis, and I am pretty fired up. The pick has definitely grown on me over the last couple of days. Going over into the 2nd round, Cam Jergens, who was hand-selected by Jason Kelce to be his replacement. He's been watching film allegedly for 3 years for Howie Roseman trying to draft his replacement. He said that Jergens is the best that he's seen through all of that tape searching. And then Nakobe Dean in the 3rd round feels like the steal of the draft. Personally, I don't know how you feel about that, but this is a guy who covers well in the pass game. He's a great tackler. He wraps up, which is incredibly rare to see these days at the linebacker position. Sure, he's a little bit undersized, but he's just another guy who's going to fly around the field and make plays nonstop. That's all he did at Georgia. I went back and watched a little bit more tape today just to refresh myself because I haven't seen it in quite a while. And man, I'm fired up to see him be an Eagle. And then what I said in the beginning, you have to factor in everything that they did. The Eagles traded away pick number 19 and a 3rd round pick for A.J. fucking Brown. This is a guy who's a top 10 player at his position in the NFL. He's big, he's fast, he can jump, he's great at the catch point, he's physical at the line, he's great after the catch. This is a receiver who does everything right and everything you could possibly ask for him. And Nick Sirianni's offense, this guy is going to be an absolute monster. And did I mention they're going to get him for his age 25 to 29 seasons? This year for cheap. It definitely gets a lot more expensive next year. But this is a guy who can play. And if you're going to spend a 1st and a 3rd round pick on a guy, why not this dude? I mean, this is a top 10 guy at his position. I'm fired up as an Eagles fan to get him. And I think everybody across Eagles Kingdom is fired up.
Well, and you talk about the money, there's only $57 million on that deal guaranteed. So it's a super team-friendly extension for the Birds, given the stature of the athlete. And that's, again, guys, like, where do you put your value? Because are you gonna pay the top dollar for a guy? And, A.J. Brown, for me, there's a new line, okay? And, like, you talk about baseball, you got the Mendoza line. If you're not hitting above 200, you suck. The wide receiver market got absolutely turned upside down. Thank you to Trent Baalke and the Jacksonville Jaguars for throwing a wrench into everybody's future plans here with that Christian Kirk money. And for years now, I think years ahead, we will be talking about Christian Kirk money because A.J. Brown needs Christian Kirk money. Christian Kirk gets 18 and a half over 5 years or AAB for 5 years. And he's not cleaning A.J. Brown's cleats as far as I'm concerned. So it's a crazy, awesome, team-friendly deal for y'all, given the volatility of the wide receiver market. And I mean, there's already chemistry there with the quarterback. Even though you're a hater of Jalen Hurts, I think that that's something that
That's
can't
not
be measured
true.
and brings value.
That's not true. I mean, it's kind of true, but it's
totally
it's not
true.
100%
Don't
true.
lie. Don't lie on here.
I've said nice things about Jalen Hurts. I've said not nice things about Jalen Hurts. I think he's a perfectly fine quarterback. I don't think he's a franchise guy. That's all I've ever said. You know that. So for the number one overall draft class for both of us, Casey, I'm pretty sure we match up on this. We match up with the general consensus for all of draft guys. I think the Ravens are going to be everybody's number one overall draft class. I'm sure that's the same for you.
Clear, yeah.
Yeah, it's black and white, very clear. The Ravens they usually have great drafts. This was an exceptional draft, even for Baltimore. 11 picks. They had 3 in the top 45. They got Kyle Hamilton, who was number 1 or 2 on everybody's big board before the last month and a half, when for some reason we all decided to talk ourselves out of this guy, even though the tape just screams that this guy's an impact player in the NFL. I'm guilty of it myself. I saw the 40 time and was like, whoa, got to pause a little bit, but went back and watched the tape. This guy's an absolute monster. Tyler Linderbaum, I think is how you say his name, the center out of Iowa. Disgusting mauler in the run game. He's going to be an absolute monster there. Watching him pull is one of my favorite things to do whenever I would go and watch tape of him. Just watching him pull and maul guys was absolutely awesome. And then David Ojabo out of Michigan, surefire first rounder, tears his Achilles. I said, ACLs don't worry me. Achilles do, but only 21 years old, plenty of time for him to rehab. It's not like they're going to need him for this season. He's a guy who they're going to be stashing and hopefully bringing back probably in his sophomore year, his second year in the NFL. But 3 really, really high ceiling picks in that first round. And I think Linderbaum might be my favorite pick, even though he's probably the least sexy one, just because of what he brings to Baltimore specifically, man. Lamar Jackson running behind that guy is going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, the only heat that he got was just that he's not very long, and so he's super limited in being a center, but he's a guy that, like, when you look at position by position through this draft, Tyler Linderbaum's going to be an all-pro center. He's definitely going to be a Pro Bowl center.
Definitely has the potential,
he's that good at his craft. And that's another thing. Talking about Kyle Hamilton, I was in fits throughout this entire draft cycle with the disrespect that was going towards him, because that all goes to the position. The value of the safety is such a lesser consideration than that of a cornerback, because of, you don't have a safety playing man defense every single snap, right?
Yeah.
So, like, he's not lined up with somebody particularly, and you see that there's limitations in what a safety can do. But this guy, I've been calling him the human highlight reel forever, and he's as impressive for, like, his length and his speed, even though that it was a knock at his pro day. The size and the speed is rare for the position, and the productivity is incredible. Other guys that were just super Ravens picks: Travis Jones, big beefy motherfucker down in the middle of the defensive line, and then Daniel Falele, who's something like 6'8", 315 or 380 pounds, whatever
Big
he is,
boy.
massive tackle, fills a huge void for them, because Morgan Moses is the guy at left tackle right now. Falele was a steal at pick 110 as far as I'm concerned, and I think that he fits the mold perfectly. So I love this. They rounded it out with a Mizzou kid, Tyler Batty, running back, another guy that just is cookie cut, type of Ravens offensive player, and it was just they were so on brand this year that it can't be ignored.
Yeah, something neither of us mentioned either. They also traded Hollywood Brown for a first-round pick that was higher than the selection he was taken at, and they got a third-round pick. And then they don't have to go in turn and pay this guy like he's some kind of superstar wide receiver, give him a Christian Kirk-type contract when he's just not that level. This is just a disgusting draft. It's unbelievable. And this team, if they hadn't gotten it just completely decimated by injuries last year, probably win that division, even with the steps forward from the Bengals last year, and are probably advancing pretty far into those AFC playoffs. No, I mean, this is a dominant football team when everything's firing, and they were still respectable, even with being the most injured team I've seen in probably a decade at least.
I think that the path to the AFC North is pretty clear for them in this upcoming season. I think that, the Bengals, hey, props, give them their flowers, but they so far over exceeded expectations that I don't think that 2022 is a complete letdown spot, but I think that the Ravens, barring health, if they can maintain their health and speed throughout the entire season, I don't think that there's a real close contender in that North division.
Well, there is still that team that traded for that one guy up in Cleveland. I mean, they probably have something to say about it. That's the AFC North and the AFC North and the AFC West are. The AFC North and West are both going to be just absolutely unbelievable. I mean, Pittsburgh got better too. They got a new quarterback. Who knows what Pickett's going to turn into? They got George Pickens, like you mentioned. They got Mitchell Trubisky, quarterback out of the University of North Carolina or Duke, whatever the fuck it was. I don't remember anymore. We talked about it just last week. Hey, maybe Mitch comes in there. He's a dog, huh? Maybe they go and win the division for all the yins up there in Pittsburgh.
This is the year of the birds. I've got a future on the Ravens. I got a future on the Eagles. And I guess that's the length of it. But I do have futures on both of them to win their divisions.
I love that. That makes me smile. Well, we can go ahead. We've already talked about our draft classes, and we've mentioned, you mentioned briefly that we were going to talk about this, and that's how differently teams are starting to value that wide receiver position. I mentioned that Hollywood Brown trade, a team moving off of a wide receiver. But there's been some superstars that are head and shoulders above a player like Hollywood Brown who have gotten some massive hauls. You mentioned the Tyreek Hill trade where they got 6 picks back. A.J. Brown was moved and immediately given a 4-year, $25 million average annual value deal. Devontae Adams was traded for 2 first-rounders, I believe, or a first and a second.
2 first, 2 seconds.
Yeah, just a lot of really, really talented players getting moved at the wide receiver position. And I think it's kind of creating these two strategies that are very different when it comes to building the wide receiver position. There's the teams who are going to go out and pay those veteran wide receivers and pay them what their fair market value is. So they've obviously have been established in the mid $20 million range with A.J. Brown, Devontae, all those guys getting those caliber of deals. But then there's the other strategy, and I think the A.J. Brown trade is the one that keeps coming back into my head because of how blueprinty it is. You know, they did exactly what teams that are looking to do this do. They traded their star wide receiver, A.J. Brown, and they went out and with the pick they got from him, got a guy who's on a rookie contract who has a very similar skill set in Treylon Burks out of Texas A&M. He is an absolute guy who's just like A.J. Brown. He's fast, he's big, he's physical at the line of scrimmage, he's physical at the catch point. He can make guys miss after catching the football. Great with the ball in his hands. Very similar skill set, but the problem with this is you're counting on a 21-year-old kid who's never been hit by anyone on an NFL defense before, at least when they're in the league, to turn into that player that you just refuse to pay. And it's a very risky strategy, and I think some teams are more equipped to do this, like the Chiefs clearly did a very good job with their picks. But I'm not sure that this is the thing to do, and that's correct in the grand scheme of things. You know, I think you got to pay these guys when you get the opportunity to. I talk about it in baseball all the time. When you get your guy and you trade them away, A, it's bad for the game. B, it's bad for your team. C, it's bad for your fans. And 4, it's bad for your bottom line. Like, it's an all-around loss, at least in the sport of baseball. In football, it's a little bit understandable with how much guys get beat up. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this because really I think it's a case-by-case basis. But I'm not a big fan of the strategy in general.
Well, I've got a theory that kind of connecting both of your thoughts there is that when you get your guy in the NFL, there's only one guy that you're trying to get, and that's your quarterback. And these teams that are the ones that are willing to sign onto these contracts with these superstar wide receivers are the guys that are uncertain of their quarterback. We're talking about Tyreek to the Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa. We're talking about A.J. Brown to the Eagles. You just said earlier, Jalen Hurts is not a franchise guy. We're talking about Devontae Adams to the Raiders, Derek Carr, who gets paid like he's a top 6 or 7 quarterback.
Real expensive.
But if I can rattle off 10, 11, 12 that I would take every day of the week ahead of Derek Carr. So, I mean, I think that the blueprint is that teams that are uncertain in their guy, the league is a boat race to getting your quarterback, and that's an undeniable fact.
Yep.
I mean, that's why you see drafts unfold in the way that they do, but just getting that top tier receiver to go with the quarterback that you're hoping pans out helps that cause. And then a team like the Chiefs is willing to pivot into making a more well-rounded wide receiver room that a guy like they've got in Patrick Mahomes can make the most out of.
I think you hit it on the head, honestly. It's not an angle that I had thought of, but it makes perfect sense. And I think that there's even another layer to that is, Say the Dolphins decide that Tua is not their guy. They don't have a first-round pick. They're in a shit spot, whether Tua pans out or not, really, because they don't have that going forward. If Jalen Hurts doesn't pan out, the Eagles have 2 first-round picks next year and A.J. Brown sitting on their roster. They have a great offensive line. So if they decide Jalen Hurts isn't the guy, they're then able to go and turn around future draft capital to go handpick their guy. Say that they think C.J. Stroud's going to fall to the 3rd pick, or they want to go up and trade for Bryce Young at the number 1 overall pick. However it ends up panning out, there's also Cameron Williams out of USC. I believe he's actually coming out in 2 years, but I digress. I think that is another layer that's super interesting, is I think the Eagles might be positioning themselves for a real run in 2023 with one of the big-name rookie quarterbacks, and that's why you go out and you pay that wide receiver, because you're a long ways away from having to pay that quarterback. And yeah, you can point to saying, they're probably doing it for now. Jalen Hurts on that second-round money, he makes nothing compared to what any of these first-rounders make, or obviously anybody on a second contract. But I think that's another layer that makes things pretty interesting, as you go out and you get pieces for the rookie quarterback whenever you do bring him in. If Hurts pans out, great. I would love for Jalen Hurts to turn into a franchise guy and take that step this year as an Eagles fan. But if he doesn't, I think the Eagles are very well positioned to go out and pivot and go grab a guy who could be a franchise guy. Maybe trade some first-round picks for a disgruntled quarterback next offseason. We know another one's going to pop up. They always do. So I think that's another layer that kind of makes the conversation interesting too.
Yeah, I just think that it sucks when the weight of the world comes down on a rookie quarterback that's taken with a high draft pick. Just the stigma of what comes with the value of a position that you're taking in the draft. It sucks when a kid gets taken there and then doesn't get any help. That's why, to me, the Jets win the entire offseason because of what they did for Zach Wilson.
Totally.
That is an organization committed to a young buck, and they're doing all the right things to help him succeed. So if you're not down to do that, if you want to make the investment up front and you're not down to continue to put into it, you're wasting everything that you have. You're wasting time, you're wasting money, you're wasting your reputation as a GM, a head coach. You are absolutely screwing the pooch if you're willing to take the leap on a kid that you believe in and then not supplement him in his first 2-3 years in the league.
Yeah, and who do you think the owner and the people who are making decisions about your job status are going to care more about? The quarterback that they just invested a number 1, 2, 3 overall pick in, and they're going to be paying $30 million over the next 4 years, or if they pick up his 5th-year option, an even bigger number than that, or just the guy that's calling the shots that wasn't able to build around him. Like, you're going to lose your job. It's not going to be the quarterback. It's always going to be the GM first. Very rarely do you get to see guys make 2 draft selections. I think the anomaly there is Ryan Pace in Chicago, but I think we all agree that he should have been gone long before that. That's just the Bears ownership group kind of dropping the ball there.
Right. Even a quarterback taken in the 3rd round like Malik Willis, the hope for the Tennessee Titans is still that someday they will be in a position that they have to pay him $30 million a year. That's the hope in drafting a quarterback.
For sure.
If you find yourself in a position to take one, you're hoping that you have a generational guy every single time, so you might as well buy in to building around him.
So that's a perfect segue to what I wanted to talk about next with you, and that's actually Malik Willis falling to the 3rd round. I think 86 overall, if I'm remembering correctly off the top.
I think that's right.
Yeah, 86, give or take a couple picks in either direction. But Malik Willis falling to the 3rd round. He was a guy who over the last 6 weeks has shot up everybody's draft board. Everybody was saying going to go in the first round, going to go in the top 10. Look at the Panthers at 6 and the Falcons at 8 and the Seahawks at 9. If he doesn't go there, he's going to go to 20 to the Steelers. And then it never ended up happening. Pickett went to the Steelers at 20. No other quarterback was taken in the 1st round. And then Willis went 86 to the Titans. And then also a little bit of shade thrown his way from Ryan Tannehill to the press. A little bit interesting there. But not talking about that tonight. I do think those comments are worth having a conversation about at another time, probably off the air between you and I, as we tend to do. But this is something that I personally expected. You and I had a very long debate on Malik Willis the week of the draft. You made some great points. I think I also got my word in there a little bit as well. But he ended up falling into the 3rd round. So I'm curious about just how you feel about that. Obviously, you guys had a 1st-round grade in the Sunday Slate mock drafts on him. I can't quite remember off the top of my head where you guys had him going.
He was consistently a Carolina Panther for us.
Yeah.
And I think that is an organization in a place, just piggybacking off of what we just kind of concluded, is like Matt Rule's in a position where I don't think that his ownership is willing to throw him a bone big enough, to throw him a quarterback as throwing him a bone and be like, hey, buddy, go redeem yourself. I think that they're probably looking at him as a guy that's already in the middle of the ocean with a life jacket on. So whether or not
he's a bridge guy
throw him the preserver and reel him in is to be seen. But my position on Malik Willis all the way was, and I hear all your points. You were concerned that there's so much tape of him locking in on his first read and that his mental game wasn't sharp enough to succeed in the NFL. My struggle with that, and this really, I understand that there's an element of this that straight up doesn't translate to the argument, because you can't say, like, I'm concerned about his mental game, and then I can't, like, if I make a point that I think he can develop his mental game at the next level, I know that sounds silly, but he was playing at Liberty in a very rudimentary offense that was rooted on his athleticism and his playmaking ability, the cannon arm, the elusive speed, right? So I understand your concerns with the seeing one look so often. That's the way that Liberty offense was designed, around him. And so I don't believe that he's not a quarterback. I believe that he has the ability to go through progressions and make judgment decisions before just bailing out to the run. And I think that if we see that evolve and him step into a role that is a professional quarterback mold at par or above the standard, I think that the athleticism that he beholds is so much greater than anyone else in this class, that if he's able to come together in an offense that demands him be a more complex thinker, his athleticism sets him apart with the ceiling that, he could be a dude in this league.
He certainly has the potential to. I said he wasn't a first rounder on the show a couple of weeks ago. He ended up going in the third. But if it was just physical traits, like the ability to throw the football, the ability to run, the ability to just make plays. Like Malik Willis is a number 1 overall caliber player. Like he has a combination of arm strength and speed that we haven't seen at the quarterback position in the draft in a really long time. He's got a better arm than Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson obviously runs a little bit better, but like that seems to be the comparison everybody wants to make, is like he's Lamar Jackson-esque on the ground, and then people will be a little bit hyperbolic and say he's like Patrick Mahomes with his arm and Lamar Jackson with his legs, which isn't true, but he's a great football player. When you watch him, he's a great college football player, I think personally, but who knows what he turns into. When I was watching the tape at Liberty, I saw like 6 or 7 plays a game where I was just like mind blown, jaw drop on the floor, mouth agape. But there was also 5 or 6 plays a game where I was looking, saying, like, look to your left, man. Look across the field. Don't just hone in on this speed out or this curl. Like, get to your second read, dude. I am by no means a quarterback expert. I am by no means an expert in the X's and O's of football. But I can see when a quarterback's locked into a guy because it's what he's told to do by his coach, and what a quarterback is locked into a guy because he can't get to the next guy. And that's a problem for me and I said this on the show last week, 2 weeks ago when we talked about the draft. If I can't trust you to go through your reads against a rudimentary system and below par players at Old Dominion, I cannot trust you to do that in the NFL, where the defensive players are bigger, faster, stronger, better coached, and the systems are the best in the world, full of disguises. Trying to break down NFL coverages as somebody who isn't like just a complete tape junkie is so hard to do because they disguise everything so well. And if he's not coming into the NFL with a certain level of acumen and already doing that, like any at all, like I have a hard time believing he's going to go from not being able to do this in the slightest to being able to do it at a level that's acceptable to be successful. If he was coming in with some ability to do it, then I think I would be much more apt to believe in him going forward. But I just don't see it when I watch him. And I could be wrong. I mean, I said a lot of the same things about Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert was a guy who was really one read at Oregon. It was very similar to what you said. They built the offense around his athleticism, his ability to move the pocket. And then he comes to the NFL and he's a drop back passer and he's just unbelievable at it. So who knows? Maybe Liberty's coaching staff was holding him back, but maybe also they could have been covering up those blemishes for him.
Could be true. Any of the above could be true. But as a self-proclaimed, for the both of us, not professional scout, I just have to believe that he can somewhat be a quarterback if he's a Division I quarterback. Like, and I know that he's playing mid-major at Liberty, but man, even though he's not at a Power 5, he got recruited to one, and then he transferred to get more playing time. So, like,
Auburn,
however
right?
that translates in your mind, so be it. But he is a better quarterback than most guys. Like, how many guys didn't fucking get drafted? Like,
oh, for sure.
Something's there.
For sure.
And he has to possess those basic abilities. He has to.
Yeah, and I definitely don't want to come off as a hater or be banging the drum. Malik Willis sucks. Like, he's just not a first-round guy. Quarterbacks with these levels of deficiencies mentally aren't first-rounders. This is where he should have went all along, and I think the Malik Willis case highlights a lot of the smokescreen that the NFL draft media kind of puts up whenever this comes around. Like, we don't know shit about what teams have on their boards. Some guys, like the Patriots pick of what was the Patriots
Cole
first
Strange,
rounder?
Chattanooga.
Yes. So Cole Strange, like the Rams laughed in their presser that they were doing when he got taken, saying, "Oh, we thought he'd be around when we got on the board." They didn't have a pick until the third round. And then Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch come out and they say, "Well, we think he could have been a first rounder for sure." So, like, and we're both guilty of this. Like, I've done mock drafts, you've done mock drafts. We can only go off of what we hear and what we see on tape. Every single NFL front office, all 32 teams, are viewing these players from their own perspectives and making their own conclusions. They don't give a shit about what Mel Kiper and Daniel Jeremiah and all these guys who write these mock drafts. They don't give a shit where they think Cole Strange should go. Bill Belichick knows where Cole Strange should go. I'm going to give that guy the benefit of the doubt. You know what I mean? So I kind of lost my train of thought there, but I think what I was saying is Malik Willis, it was kind of this smoke and mirrors that he was magically pushed into the top 10 somehow when they've been talking about for months. This is a draft where maybe one guy goes in the first round. He's not going to be drafted high. Malik Willis, Ritter, those guys, they're probably later picks. And then the draft was getting closer. The guys' mock drafts weren't getting a lot of clicks, so they said, hey, we got to start bumping those quarterbacks up a little bit. You know, it really feels like that kind of happened, and we all kind of bought into this narrative that these quarterbacks were starting to be getting taken a little bit earlier than we initially expected. But I don't know. That could be full-blown conspiracy nut by me, tinfoil hat wearing son of a bitch.
Well, it was just unprecedented, right? Like, quarterback has been basically in the last 5 years has been so obviously it has been the belle of the ball at the draft, the position,
yeah,
right?
forever,
for the last 5 years, and it just wasn't this year because for 5 fucking years teams have been drafting their quarterback. So whether or not they're all hitting, like, the need, the demand for quarterbacks wasn't that high this year, and however it played out, one in the first, one in the second, one in the third, one in the fourth. I mean, it was just not. It just wasn't the year of the quarterback, and that's fine.
So the last thing we're going to talk about tonight is who went number 1 overall. Casey and I both predicted me on the show, Case in the mock drafts, that Aidan Hutchinson was going to go number 1 overall. Not so fast. It's the edge rusher Trayvon Walker out of Georgia going number 1 overall. Kind of trended towards that way in the morning of draft day. A lot of people started coming out and saying Trayvon Walker was going to go 1, Hutchinson 2, and then Stingley 3, which is exactly what ended up happening. So, Case, little bit of an oddity seeing Trayvon Walker, an edge rusher who doesn't necessarily rush the passer all too well, at least in college. He was number 8 on your big board looking at it right now. You had both Aidan Hutchinson and Kayvon Thibodeau ranked above him for edge rushers. So why do you think it is that Jacksonville decided to go with Walker? I'm curious.
I mean, we've been saying, me and Big A on the Slate for months, been saying that we've been calling Trevon Walker an alien. I mean, he's as astounding a specimen as there was in the draft, right next to Jordan Davis, basically. And I'm for that reason alone, I'm not shocked. There's Trent Baalke's got a history of making such calls in his past, particularly with the 49ers before he got this gig in Jacksonville. And, the word on the street is that he was the one pounding the table for Trevon Walker until he got his way, and so be it. I mean, they had a hell of a weekend too overall for the draft. My biggest concern in that, when we talk about defensive ends in the NFL, we're talking about a position with an insanely high premium, right? And the guys that get paid are the ones that get to the quarterback. I don't not believe that Trayvon Walker can get to the quarterback, but I do believe that 1, 2, or maybe even 3 pieces of this Georgia Bulldogs defense that was historically picked from in this year's draft are going to be exposed at the next level because they're not surrounded by, and granted, the NFL is the guys that get taken, but a class like that, there was nothing but blue chip guys in rotation for that Georgia Bulldogs defense, and somebody was getting some slack picked up that you couldn't see through your TV on Saturday. And so I think that somebody's going to get exposed, and I think that if anybody has a chance, it's Trayvon Walker. I think that Nakobe Dean was incredibly versatile. I think that Lewis Seen as a safety is as smash mouth, hard hitting of a safety, playmaking kind of safety as you can look for.
Yeah, that dude,
I think that Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt are both sickos in the middle. If I'm looking for a guy that I'm going to get the cheap side of that premium for the position, I like the way that Aidan Hutchinson and KT get after the quarterback.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. If you're picking a guy number 1 overall at the edge rusher position, which has become the second most important position on the field to me personally, overtaking left tackle, the guys who get to the quarterback are the most valuable players on defense or the second most valuable position on a roster, at least for me. If I'm picking a guy number 1 overall at that position, he has to be able to get to the passer. And Walker has all the tools in his tool shed to be able to do that. He's physical, he's fast, he's bendy. Like, this is a guy who is a premium athlete. He can do a lot of things. I think he moved inside a little bit during some points during the season as well. But he doesn't necessarily get to the passer all that well. It's kind of like Jordan Davis. He was more of a run stopper than he was a pass rusher at the college level. And Aidan Hutchinson did both. He had 14.5 tackles for losses his senior year. He had however many sacks he did. The guy was a Heisman Trophy finalist. And Kayvon Thibodeau has probably the best collection of pass rushing moves and athleticism and skill set of anybody in this draft. He's just a little bit, needs a little bit more refinement than these other guys do. But it just feels weird seeing Walker go above these guys. It feels like a move in baseball where you're picking number 1 overall, like what the Pirates did last year. You don't pick the best guy. You pick the guy who think you can sign the easiest. But that doesn't make sense in football because everything's slotted. It feels like they went and tried to outsmart the room when the answer to the question was staring them right in the face. Like, it didn't have to be Aidan Hutchinson. If KT would have went first, I would have been more than understanding about that. He was the projected number 1 overall pick going into this college season. Things just didn't work out for him. He got hurt. He was too big of a prospect for too long. People started picking him apart, just like happens with guys like Kyle Hamilton, happens in other drafts all the time. It's just a weird feeling pick, you know what I'm saying? And it's probably a bulky thing, trying to outsmart the rest of the room. He'll probably be gone by the end of this year. It does feel disappointing seeing Jacksonville get the first overall pick and go with this guy. Do like the Devin Lloyd pick at 27, though. That was hot.
Yeah, I don't hate it by any means. I see the belief, but again, to your point, if you're gonna do this at 1-1, you gotta at least have the production to prove it. Because if you're taking a defensive end, if you're taking a guy that you want to go get the quarterback with the first overall pick in the draft, Aidan Hutchinson had 51 pressures last year. What question do you have? Like, what do you need there in Jacksonville? Is that your biggest point of need? Is your pass rush? Go get the best fucking pass rusher in the draft. Not Travon Walker. Like, the upside's crazy, and I get it. But the production's not there. You can't tangibly see this guy is better than this guy because of this. It's all in measurables and Trent Baalke's imagination. So, I hope it pans out for him because his job's probably on the line for this. But, I mean, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall of that war room for the 72 hours leading up to the draft because I'm sure that it was borderline hostile with a variety of different opinions because we talk about the talent in this draft. You look at the tackles, Ickey, Evan Neal, Charles Cross, any of the three of them could have been 1-1. Kyle Hamilton If you really needed a DB, could have been 1-1. Sauce or Stingley could have been 1-1.
Yep.
Any of these defensive ends could have been 1-1, and you took the third option for most, the guy with the least amount of production of anybody in that group, that group in any position. So I mean, it is what it is. I wouldn't have ever done it.
I want to be fair to all three of these guys. There was no Myles Garrett, Von Miller, Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa. That guy wasn't in this draft. There was no, this guy's most likely going to be an all-pro. He's going to be a perennial Pro Bowler. He's going to come in his rookie year and dominate the league. That guy wasn't in these drafts. None of these guys are that caliber of prospect, at least for me. But still, to pick the guy that just has more question marks than the other two at 1-1 when you're a bad team. Trevor Lawrence, number 1 overall pick last year, was bad. You need to start building around him in order to get him put in a position to be successful. And you go with the guy who is the biggest question mark. I just have a hard time wrapping my head around that when the Jaguars have been this bad for this long. They lost 15 straight games in 2020. They got the number 1 overall pick again this year. It's just a bad process. You should be going with the guy that you had the least amount of questions with in that position when they're in the situation they're in. They don't have the draft capital. They don't have the talent on the team to be rolling the dice on guys. I hate the move. If he could turn out to be a great player, Trayvon Walker, he certainly has the tools to be, and maybe I'm eating crow on this even by the end of the year. He goes out and wins Defensive Rookie of the Year or something like that. But it just feels like bad process, and I'm all about process over results.
Yeah, I just think you can only excite a fan base with the number 1 overall pick for so long.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if you're there, you're the worst. So that's the parody of the draft, and it sucks. There was so many takes that came out right after or even leading up to the take. I think that Florio was the leader of this army, but talking about how just crappy the draft is for the prospects, because it's like, hey, guess what, Joe Burrow, I know you're from here, but you wanted to go somewhere else after you graduated college? Never mind. You're coming to Cincinnati. There's nothing you can say about it. So, Jacksonville as a town, Duval County, I don't think it's much of a vacation spot. And, I mean, it's no Miami, and the team sucks, and you don't get to choose. So, I don't know. That's all silly. I like the draft. It's a part of this thing, but you can only keep your fan base excited about being the worst team in football through the draft for so long if you continue to fail.
Especially when you already have the quarterback. Usually fan bases are okay with failing until you go get the guy. Trevor Lawrence was lauded as the quarterback prospect, the best one we've seen since Andrew Luck. Now that you got him, you got to start winning. Otherwise, his contract's going to be up. He's going to go somewhere else. Why would he want to be in this dysfunctional mess? And the fans are going to start disowning him even more than they already had. I mean, when they beat the Colts in Week 17, they were all wearing clown masks talking about the owner, saying shit like sell the team. That's what the Jacksonville Jaguars are right now. They're a complete mess organizationally, on the field, off the field, in the front office, at the level of ownership. And to see them make this move, it's just puzzling. I just truly don't get it.
Yeah, no, we're in the same boat.
Well, Case, on short notice, you came in, took the ball, and absolutely were awesome today. I really, really appreciate you coming on. One of my best friends right here. Just can't thank you enough for coming on, man. Literally texted this guy at, 11 o'clock your time last night to come on the show, and you immediately were like, fuck it, let's go. Why not?
Hey, I got your back, baby.
I appreciate you, man. To all those listening at home, we thank you so much for listening to us, and we will see you guys next week.